This is Aisle 42. Welcome to Aisle 42. I'm Corwin Hebert, and this episode explores the future of grocery through the eyes of a speed-to-market specialist. Some even call him the anti-broker. I'm chatting with Jud Currie, Ethical Food Group's very own retail and sales leader, and you're going to love this conversation. Jud's storied career includes category-leading work with major brands like Colgate-Palmolive, McCain, Baby Gourmet, and Love Child Organics. Now he's driving better-for-you products onto shelves across North America as a part of our EFG family, and I'm thrilled to have him on the show. We unpack the real art of retail, from winning at the shelf to pitching buyers to what makes a brand truly retail-ready. Jud shares how he helps founders build trust with buyers and why he believes every grocery aisle is ripe for disruption. So let's get into it with Jud Currie, because the future of food starts now. Okay, Jud, here we go. And Aisle 42 first. This is the first time I've interviewed an Ethical Food Group teammate. You may be new to EFG, but you are far from being the new kid on the block when it comes to the grocery store. So I'm super excited to get into it, starting with my first question. Jud, when looking to the future, what's the one change in the food system that would excite you the most?
For me, it's always about powerful, high nutrition products with a minimalized nutrition deck. It's what I've seen now. I think we've seen it in the what I call the faux meat category. I think those products are spectacular, but I think the long-term winners in those categories will be ones with smaller nutritional decks. So I'm really hoping that we go back to almost, my grandmother, who's going to turn 99 in June of this year, she's a child of depression, but she ate organically probably the first 65 years of her life. And that's why she still lives in the same house. She raised her 4 kids. That's why she still plays bridge 4 times a week and walks everywhere. So I think if we can get back to the old days of minimalist food and whole foods, and I think we're getting there, that would be something that I'd be deeply excited about.
I love it. Yeah, that's well said. And I think simple ingredients just are a lot easier on our bodies. They're a lot easier to understand, and we can build health and wellness and nutrition around ingredients that don't scare us or come with a lot of scientific names.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I live my life. So those are the products that I choose to chase and choose to disrupt with. And I worked for a big food company back in the day. So I know what it's like internally there, and I do like to scare them a little bit. And I think a lot of times they do get scared by things that just bring it back to, like I say, our grandparents' farms.
So good. Now, your place in the grocery world is that of, I guess we'll call it broker, but that description doesn't really do you justice. Take us behind the scenes a bit here. How do you approach this seemingly daunting task of helping food and beverage brands land and thrive in new retail accounts?
Yeah, you know what? For me, Corwin, it's all about understanding what's happening at the shelf. I always say the war is won at the shelf. So, be honest with you, it's very much about my gut, but I do have a high level of understanding of certain categories. So, I certainly target things that I think might be a good fit. And then I delve a little deeper into those companies, have initial conversations. We kind of go through the financials to say, okay, where do you compete? I mean, if the average price in any given category is $5, but you can't hit 10, you may have a small problem. So that's how I dissect it. And yeah, I know that myself and the team at EFG, we've talked a lot about brokers and brokering, but I'm very open about it. I kind of consider myself the anti-broker in that I don't want to just take 4,000 brands and I'll let you know how it goes. I think there's a real opportunity that the pie is big enough for me to have 5 or 6, and now that I've expanded my wings and my breadth with the Ethical Food Group, to have a few more than that. But it's still about being part of those teams. I'm not a broker for those teams. I'm part of those teams. And up until for the last 5 or 6 years, for my US based clients, I've been their Canadian sales lead. My Canadian based clients, I'm the North American sales lead. So I'm very much part of the team. And, the industry is kind of given me the name brand builder. I kind of like that because that's essentially what I started rocket to be 15 years ago was to be kind of a branding expert. But I soon realized it's what I know best that pays the bills, Corwin, which is sales and sales strategy and getting products to market very quickly.
Yeah. Can you give some context? What are some of the brands you worked with in the past and are working with now, just so listeners can get a sense of the sandboxes that you're in?
Sure. Well, I'll go way, way back. I'm a 25-year plus CPG guy, and I was kind of born into this industry. My mom was a bit of a pioneer at Mars Canada. She was there for 25 years. I cut my teeth at Mars Canada, spent my formative years at Colgate-Palmolive, of which I'm super fortunate that I was there at that part of my career because I don't think that there is any other tier one CPG company, maybe globally, that is more strategic than they were. And I was part of that model. Colgate was incredible at taking, not just buying category information or AC Nielsen as it is here in Canada, but using every morsel of that to plan strategy and go to market. So I was brought up in that. And then I spent some time at McCain Foods, both in sales, but also consumer and trade marketing. But I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, Corwin. So I often sacrifice title for experience within my corporate life. And in 2009, I broke off on my own and I started Rocket. And I was very fortunate to hook on. I had a couple private label wins early, but really the biggest branded win that I had early on was with Baby Gourmet. And that's where I met Rick Williams at the Ethical Food Group. I was driving the sales initiative and going to market. Rick was supplementing that on the marketing side. Baby Gourmet is, one of Canada's most successful startups in a long, long time. And then a couple of years after that, I went over to Love Child Organics. So became a competitor of Baby Gourmet Foods, but I was also a shareholder there and, essentially replicated the speed to market that we did in Canada. But Love Child had a point of difference where we had a lot of success in the US at Walmart, Sprouts, Rayleigh's, Lucky's, the Ahold Group. So that's where I really hit the ground running. And then in 2016, we were fortunate enough to sell Love Child Organics, which was very positive for all of us. And then since that time, I've been still trying to disrupt in a multitude of categories. But Corman, to answer your question, it's all in that better for you space. Even those two baby food companies that I mentioned earlier, they were disruptive, unique to Canada. In 2011, the entire baby food set was 95% starch filled jars. Now it's 75% organic pouches. So it was a real turnaround. And quite frankly, just the way I'm wired, I'm always looking for things to, again, disrupt and change categories that, in my eyes, become complacent. And they become complacent, for instance, in that baby food instance. That's why the baby food category became a commodity. It was just really, bigger companies putting more starch and fillers into those products, and they had like zero nutritional value. So again, it's like any market correction. When things get complacent, things explode and change.
Love Child, when our daughter was young, we went through a lot of those. We were good for about 20 pouches a week for a couple of years.
Thank you for your service.
You're welcome. It was intense. We had to make sure we had the right lineup. That that was like it was diapers and Love Child. That was all that mattered for a while. So
Well, it was really interesting too. And, when I was with the first baby food company there and getting them off the ground, yeah, in Canada, it was truly unique and their timing was perfect. But in the US, they were late. But Love Child did have a nutritional point of difference there. They were putting quinoa in there to help babies be fuller. They were using acerola berry, not ascorbic acid, as a preservative. So they were doing things unique. So when I would take Love Child down to the US, they'd say, "Well, I like you, but why you're different?" I could answer that question, whereas I couldn't with the other brand. So again, how I present products, it's very simple. The days of presenting 30-page decks to buyers is over, and the buyers hate it. And you have to be respectful of their time. And really, the flow of those decks is here's who we are, here's how we're different, and here's how we're going to execute. Those are the three hook slides that you've done your homework, but that how you are different is critical, critical, critical. Because the last thing you want to do is present a Me Too to any national buyer in North America. And quite frankly, I've never done it because I've vetted those companies first. But there's definitely a flow to it that I really pride myself in terms of best practices and getting things to market. And I know, Cora, when we've talked about this, I think a big point of difference of what we're trying to accomplish is we really want the clients to be involved in those meetings. It's not just me presenting 10 brands at a time to a buyer at Kroger US. It's very specific to them. And again, there's this passion process model that no one has the passion and the knowledge that a founder or somebody within that company has, but nobody has the process that I have in terms of getting those things to market and speaking that language. So the 1-2 punch in my mind is critical.
Let's talk about these buyers, this retail world for a second. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his book, James Richardson, his book, Ramping Your Brand. He said in his book that you ultimately need to be more of an expert on your category than the buyer you meet. You should be able to embarrass your buyer with your category knowledge. Now, yeah, I'm not sure. Is that truly the case? I've never heard of shaming as a sales tactic, but what's it like in the room with these buyers? Where are you finding that opportunity to bring a brand quickly into their retail landscape?
So I've never heard that, but I have lived it and I believe it. When I started cutting my teeth in this industry a long time ago, the difference back then than today is you'd be sitting across from someone who'd probably been on that desk for 10 or 15 years. And if you didn't know your stuff, you would get schooled on your own stuff and become embarrassed. So it was instilled in us to be super prepared so we wouldn't get schooled by the guy who knows the category inside out. And I've kept that with me. And as the industry has changed, and the buyers have become a little bit younger, and there's human resource succession plans in there, you don't see buyers on the same desk for more than 3 years, it feels like, anymore. So the real advantage for someone like me is to do what you just said. And I know they're super busy in those buildings, and that's the way I come at it. I never go into a meeting going, "Hey, Mr. Buyer, what are you going to do for us?" It's more like we're coming in to say, "This is what we're bringing to you. And we've done all the work for you. So all you need to do is just check the box for us." So to answer your question, I hearken back to the art of war, which is knowing your competition or knowing who you're talking to better than they know themselves, right? So that I agree with that 100%. But again, the buyers, it's different. It's just different out there, but there's a real opportunity if you take it to do the work for them. And trust me, if you can make their job easy, they love you.
Well, and brands need that insight read like at their fingertips. But you and I have talked before about how a lot of brands are swimming in data and they're constantly looking for and demanding their suppliers and partners to provide data and lots of spreadsheets. And that can paralyze a brand, can't it?
It can. It can, and it's super expensive. I mean, again, back from my early days at Colgate-Palmolive, we were probably platinum buyers of category information, but we used all of it. But that could be very expensive for a smaller mid-sized business. The other thing too is how much data do you really need? As far as I'm concerned, the only real data you need is an item ranking report from AC Nielsen because that tells you what everybody's doing in the last 52 weeks. It shows you who's growing, it shows you who might be more susceptible. That's what you need to know. And again, and I think some of the bigger brokers and distributors, and God bless them, I think they have a lot of in house data, but is it effective? I mean, at the end of the day, again, back to my Colgate Palmolive days, we relied on AC Nielsen data and our own internal shipment data. That's what mattered. How are we comparing from the last month or the last year? How are we going to make that month? How are we going to make that quarter? Which ultimately leads to us making that year. So, quite frankly, the scoreboard is really what matters. What matters is goals, not necessarily shots on net or time in the neutral zone, right? It's all about the scoreboard.
That's very elbows up Canadian hockey referencey of you.
Yeah, apropos.
You're constantly evaluating brands and what they can or should not do. From your perspective, what makes a brand retail ready? And when they pitch buyers, how can they bring their best efforts to the table? Because you're in those meetings and all that prep all the time.
Yeah. And again, it's here's who you are, establish why you're innovative and why you're different. Make sure you've done the math. Make sure you know who you're competing against and can you financially compete in that category. And then also, the other part of the slide is how are you going to market? How are you going to consumer market versus trade market, which is what you would do at the shelf? And then the other thing too is it's sometimes often critical to show what does your innovation pipeline look like? Because it's often tough to just present a single SKU or two SKUs within a family lineup. The accounts want to know that they can grow with you and that every 9 months or so, or anytime they do a category review, something new from brand X is going to come. So it's critical. And this is actually the easy part because generally these companies, Corwin, they're product developers, they're engineers, they're manufacturers, right? But they have a tough time navigating through getting to the buyer, getting to the shelf. It's not their thing. I mean, I always say sometimes it's in your DNA to be a marketer or to be a salesperson, right? Or it's in your DNA to be an engineer. And some of these guys, that's why they get so much fear when you say, "No, I want to take you into Loblaws." And I say, "No, just be yourself. Don't don't try to be something you're not." Right? This is not the Wizard of Oz. It's not Shark Tank. We'll be fine.
One of the unique things that we're doing here at Ethical Food Group, and it's likely one of the reasons why we're now working together, is we're about as vertically integrated as one can get. I think when it comes to all things sales and marketing and business and investment in CPG. But the industry hasn't really worked this way. Everyone and everything feels from vendors to suppliers, service providers, it feels very siloed. Everyone's sort of founders and leaders are wrangling cats and air traffic controlling, uses up a lot of managerial and administrative mojo to kind of get the job done. But when it comes to this more holistic approach, this more strategic approach to building better for you brands in Canada, what do you think the secret sauce is? There's another cheesy one for you, secret sauce. If I've had a nickel for every time I heard that. But what is it, do you think, about this more holistic approach that's really going to land for brands?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think it needs to be leaner and meaner, right? The reason Love Child Organics was successful is because myself and the founders, the husband and wife, John and Leah, all three of us had three exclusive skill sets. She was the brains behind the formulas and the purees. John's background was in financials in the UK. He was the one who was always constantly looking at the books and seeing where we're at. And I was the one who got it to market. I think John came to maybe one meeting with me in the million meetings that we had for Love Child. But hey, look, we almost died doing it those 3.5 years. We were. I always said at the end when we did sell it, I go, I feel like we're a rock band that's been on tour for 3.5 years, and if we don't take a break, we're just going to break up. So I do think it's lean and mean, and I think that maybe the motivation for me to finally take the leap into a more entrepreneurial environment is I had some really big wins in my corporate life. Did I reap the full reward of that? No, right? And at some point, the light bulb went on that, you know what, Judd, you need to reap the reward of your impact. And often that can be the shortcoming of a big organization, right? And I think the more you want to be a big organization, you're adding inefficiencies there. So it's still critical for these companies to be lean and mean. Hey, you can get all the venture capital in the world, but you still have to spend every dollar and try to make 10 back. Just because you get $1 million in investment doesn't mean you have to add headcount. You still have to move the ship forward. So, to answer your question, I think you still have to be lean and mean, hire people that complement your skill sets, right? I've got a client base right now where they're 100% aligned with me doing what I do, which is basically get to market and get to market quick. And I will use them as needed. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Corwin, but I do think that businesses need to be very conscious of taking their monies, being lean. And again, I was brought up in this industry that if I give you $1, you try to make me 10 back. And I've lived like that my entire career.
And let's talk about some blood, sweat, and tears here for a second. When it comes to was Love Child, you said you were an investor, a stakeholder in the business. Well, from that perspective, what did you sort of learn and observe as being a stakeholder in a business that was probably always struggling with cash flow, always struggling with suppliers, always struggling with, disruptions and chaos? What was it like being on the cap table?
Yeah, you know what? Rightly or wrongly, Corwin, I have just 100% belief in myself and my ability to get things to market. So I always said to them in that instance was, you worry about what you got to worry about. I'm going to drive the top line. You worry about the bottom line. So we're still profitable. So when somebody comes knocking on our door ultimately, and they did 3.5 years after we sold our first pouch, we were able to sell the company because the books were good. But again, there was all kinds of stress involved with that. I mean, I lived on the road with those two baby food companies for probably 5 years straight. And that was every single building, big or small, in North America. I was to Bentonville, Arkansas with Walmart multiple times, Target in Minneapolis, Kroger in Cincinnati, and everywhere between, and obviously in Canada 4 million times. And when I lived in Toronto, I was 20 minutes away from Loblaws and Walmart, so I was there all the time as well. So, yeah, there's a ton of pressure, but you still have to have that belief every day. Again, rightly or wrongly, Corwin, I went into that thing head first with zero fear, and I bet on myself and I bet on that brand. Now, that brand, because it had that point of difference, that's where I was like, I can sell this outside Canada. And by the time we were done, we were on every shelf where baby food was sold, big or small, boutique right up to Walmart and Real Canadian Superstore. And we had significant penetration in the US because I could answer that here's how we're different question. Now, marketing in the US is a different animal for sure. People say, oh, it's 10 times Canada. Why wouldn't we just go there first? Well, it's 100 times more complex. So there's definitely challenges.
Yeah, it certainly is. And in this game of sales, relationships are everything. And you must feel at times that you have to protect the buyers, protect the retailers that you are looking to serve to make sure that you don't, you know, cause any rifts or challenges with that relationship. What's it like sort of working with the brands as well as working with on behalf of the retailers?
Well, again, that's how I kind of go in it. I never walk into any building going, you owe me anything. They don't owe me anything. What they owe me is the opportunity to compete. Now, I will say this yes, relationships are very, very important. But what's equally important is understanding how to play the game because the buyers do change, right? And the old school way is, oh, do you have contacts at account X? Do you have accounts at XY? I do, but there's no guarantee that they're on the desk that we need to go after. So again, understanding how to play the game is equally important, no matter because the pawns in the game change all the time.
And we're looking at a Canadian retail landscape right now. There's a lot of tariff issues. You would
Mhm.
have really heard a lot of that at Expo West in Anaheim just recently. There's a lot of flag waving and such right now. What do you think the biggest opportunity is right now for natural and organic brands looking to scale in Canada?
So as it relates to tariffs, I said I had this conversation many, many times in Anaheim this year. At the end of the day, I think a lot of it is more bark than bite, but also the show must go on. We still have to get away from the noise and we still have to go to market as best we can. The silver lining of it is absolutely is that now consumers are more focused on Canadian products and the amazing innovation that comes from here. When I moved back to Alberta in 2017, I had a look around and I went, wow, there is a ton of innovation in Western Canada that maybe when I lived in Ontario for 15 years, I didn't see or notice as much. So, again, I think it's really a wake up call for Canadian consumers, Canadian companies, Canadian manufacturers. I mean, if you can tweak your formula to make it 100% Canadian because you buy one ingredient from elsewhere, what a great kind of market correction for us as a Canadian marketplace. And I'm glad to see that the retailers are fully on board as well and everybody's waving the flag a little bit. I think, again, out of the craziness and stupidity of the news cycle, there's always a silver lining.
And you and I have CHFA coming up. And for the first time ever, Ethical Food Group is one of the sponsors of the trade show, and we're both going to be on stage. I'm leading a sustainability and profitability panel, but you are Sunday morning's retailer breakfast, Incubator Alley retailer breakfast. You're the MC, I think, right? It's all going to
Yeah,
be your
yeah.
fault. No, it's all going to be amazing. So you must be. I know that you know that crowd really well. You know all these retailers so well. You must be excited to be up there and help some of these young brands have their moment to shine.
You know what I am, and because we were there. We polished off ourselves at Love Child Organics, and I took two introverted founders of Love Child Organics and polished them off to get them on Dragon's Den. We did the biggest closing Dragon's Den deal in history to that point. I don't know if that record's been broken or not, but that thing was great. And these people are doing their own mini Dragon's Den on that Sunday morning at CHFA, and I'm super stoked for them. And even though I warned you, my face is probably better suited for radio, I will put my face in front of this and do my
No, you're fine. You're
best.
fine. You've got that. You got that smart guy look about you. You're
The
golden.
glasses for sure.
There you go. Yeah, don't take the glasses
No,
off.
I can't.
Yeah,
I can't.
yeah, yeah. And you got to keep the goatee too. That gives you some edge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You got to have that bad boy thing just in case, you know.
Scaling and growing brands with purpose. It's one thing that drives us at EFG. Impact for people on the planet. But it's personal for you when it comes to plant-based and better for you eating. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, but what does that mean for you when you're working with brands and working with retailers that you've got a personal connection to these ingredients and these products?
Yeah, and I think it's easier because I live it. You know, I've mentioned this before is do I consider myself a good salesperson? Maybe. But I think what I'm better at is conveying my passion for something and people feeling that. You know, in 2014, I had a physical with my doctor, and she said that my cholesterol was on the line. And I was like, on the line? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, it's okay, but just look at it. So I was aware of it. And of course, you know, my baby boomer parents are like, oh, it's in the family. You're doomed. Well, fast forward to 2017, I made a major change in my diet. I eat more of a plant-based diet now. And I had a physical in 2018, and all my stuff came back, in my doctor's words, pristine. And that was a real eye opener for me that, yes, I'd always been on probably the right side of the bell curve in terms of nutrition. But when I took it to another level, I realized that I can take my own health to another level by having a nutrient dense diet versus just the meat and potatoes, maybe that I was raised on. So for me, I do target products like that, Corwin. Maybe sometimes to a fault. I'm like, oh, that's the greatest thing ever, but nobody else will buy it. But I do understand again, it then once I vet that out, I do go right to the shelf and go, how can I make this work? And that's where this kind of comes in. And then layer on this incredible opportunity with Ethical Food Group with incredible marketing prowess and a fund behind it. There's all kinds of things that we can do now together to get great products to market and really be innovative and disruptive and all the things I've mentioned before.
And when you say disruptive, what are the categories that really stand out to you that are really ready for it? And I'll give you a couple, I don't know, maybe a couple of comments around it. In that, I'm answering my own question, but I do want to hear your take on it. But let's take, for example, what Amin has done with Cedar Valley pita chips. It was this relatively sleepy category with, I think, is it Stacy's is sort of like the main player there. And Cedar Valley came in with a wonderful tasting pita chip, good flavor skews, and it just that category needed a shake up, and he's helped do that. I think Sheringham Distillery is another great example of non-alc isn't new. It's certainly having its day in the sun right now, but they're coming at it with a beautifully distilled non-alcohol spirit lineup that is in grocery stores, and it's remarkable. And I think people are now serving non-alc cocktails with pride, which usually it's like everyone else gets cool drinks, but the non-alc person gets the can of something, right? Something
You're
sparkling.
right.
So what are some of the categories that you've got your eye on and going, man, I bet you there's somebody out there that is going to rock it.
Well, you and I could walk down every aisle in the grocery store and find categories that are generational and could be disrupted probably tomorrow. I mean, you could look at the commercial cereal aisle. I mean, still there's an entire aisle devoted to high sugar, high processed products targeting kids. And now there's some great cereals out there that are cleaner and meaner. I like that. You mentioned the snacking category. I mean, there's all kinds of different chips that are out there globally. Plantain chips taste amazing. If you've had them, they're incredible. So, yeah, we don't need to have a Ripple chip that's been fried 3 times and thrown in a bag. I think but again, we are human beings. We like to indulge. But I do think I was contended even back in my brand management days at McCain. And, I was the manager on frozen potatoes, which was our French fry portfolio. And McCain had done some great things with how they produced their fries. And I would always say to the guys in our department was consumers are always looking to do better, whether it's this much or this much, right? You have to kind of play on that emotion that they want to do something better. So yes, I think that there's all kinds of categories. Health and beauty is another one that you can just scan stuff on your Yuka app and it'll give you a rating about what's good in those products and what's bad. So every single aisle in the grocery store can do a little bit better, in my opinion. And that's where the opportunity is for us.
Love it. So good. Jud, I'm so glad we had this chat. I can't wait to spend that weekend in late April at CHFA in Vancouver with you. It's going to be great to walk the floor and share the stages and do all that kind of stuff. But love the fact that we're working together and that bringing brands that love people and planet, bringing them to market faster. That is an exciting proposition and one that I'm really proud to play my small part in. So I love it. Love that we're doing this together. Appreciate you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Aisle 42. Please reach out to Jud or myself anytime and learn more at ethicalfoodgroup.com. Okay, that's it for me. I'm Corwin Hebert, and I'll see you in the future.